Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person. Yosemite's one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Mike Lindell's a conspiracy.
But you haven't. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They said nobody gets it in order. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Amazing. He can't sit down. He's got a burning in his butthole. He's got a fire. He's got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Big, massive dumps.
Oh, I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
Somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing.
You see, this is a simple meme that you would find on the internet, but this meme is very real.
You ain't seen nothing yet until you see the flaming butthole.
Putting us on our knees to China.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
I will eat your ass.
It's Monday. Welcome to the show. Round the Nation, right here, Waldorf Nation. I'm having a case of the Mondays. I don't know if all of you are, but I sure am. Oh, wow. Are you all ready for Joe Rogan Discourse Week 2? I hope not, because I sure the fuck ain't doing it. Not at all interested. I know. And again, it's got nothing to do with like Rogan Bros. I'm just literally tired of it. It's so, I'm sorry. No more. Although I do love the comments that I get that are not at all stupid and ironic. People like, oh, are you jealous? Are you jealous of Joe Rogan? No. You know, it's funny. I could sit there and say dumb things on the internet after smoking DMT. You don't smoke DMT, do you? I got no fucking idea. But, you know, I can do that and say ridiculously stupid things for 4 hours a day. And, you know, maybe I would make $100 million. But I'm not all interested. Not interested at all. See, I actually, you know, try to have facts on the show. And I understand that facts are boring. But it's kind of like eating your fucking vegetables, right? Which is an ironic statement because, you know, I'm not a huge fan of vegetables. But you know what? Fuck it. You know what I mean. All right? You know what I mean. But look, we do the show. I try to give you facts, things that might actually help you or save your life. And being jealous of other people is not something that I'm all interested in. I actually love what I do and who I am. And so I don't. It's a weird attack because it's super lazy. You see what I mean? It's like, oh, I don't have any substantive critique to levy back at you. So you must be, you know, so your critique, it just means that you are jealous. You're a jelly boy. Yeah, jelly boy. Oh yes, very, very, very jelly. Yes, of course. I am jealous of people who can, I guess, not have to work. That, I guess, you know what, to be fair, that is my jealousy. Yes, I'm jealous of people who don't have to work. You know why? Because none of us wants to fucking work. But we do. Let's see, you don't like your broccoli? I don't. I'm a super taster, meaning that, you know, I mean, I should be pretty obvious. I shouldn't have to explain that. But anyway, yeah, not good. All right, anyway. Let's see. Well, we do got a good show today. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. We have, the rebuke. It appears that Mother had allowed Mike Pence to leave the cage to go give a rebuke to Donald Trump. Oh, well, interesting. So we're going to talk about that. That's interesting. We have legitimate political discourse. Very legitimate. We have conservatives turning on each other. That's fun. They're fighting over Donald Trump. That's hilarious. We have some media fails. First, we've got a CNN fail, and then we have a Fox News fail. Both of them are hilarious and ironic. And then, of course, we'll talk about some student loans. So that whole thing, actually kind of good news. So, all right. Anyway, let's jump in. Let's dive in. Let's do it. But before we do, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Unlike Joe Rogan, I do not have $100 million or 11 million listeners, and I'm very, very jealous about that. Oh, yes. So if you could like and share the stream, maybe help me get to a little bit closer to that. You know what? You might as well just dive in. Ridiculous criticisms. Okay. We got some statements of rage. Don't want to talk about Ottawa. Nobody wants to talk about that. Oh, a lot of people are talking about that. Actually, Surfs has done a great job talking about the truckers, the whole trucker thing. All right. Former Vice President Mike Pence recently grew a passable facsimile to a spine, sort of. This is after months and months of former President Donald Trump publicly attacking him, going after him over the election certification. Mike Pence finally kind of hits back a little bit on Friday in a speech to the Federalist Society conference in Orlando, Florida. Here's what he said about the certification.
President Trump said I had the right to overturn the election. But President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election. The presidency belongs to the American people and the American people alone. And frankly, there is no idea more un-American than the notion that any one person could choose the American president.
Exactly. We all know that here in America, the Electoral College, a remnant of slavery, chooses the American president, even if the majority of the American people don't. In fact, the majority of the American people have never chosen a president. That's how we ended up getting Donald Trump and George W. Bush in the first place. Weird. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you silly goose, you. How'd you not know that, Mike Pence? We don't live in an actual democracy. That's the whole point. But anyway, hey, look, kind of a strong message. The balls were handed back to him from Mother's purse. And hey, well, you know what? That's a good thing when that happens, I suppose. But a little late. Still, he is no longer, I guess he seems to no longer be Donald Trump's bitch. No longer beta male. So I guess that's a good thing. So now, Donald Trump, speaking of him, he's not thrilled with this. In fact, here's his statement. Just on Mike Pence's statement of the fact that he had no right to do anything with respect to the electoral vote count, other than being an automatic conveyor belt for old crow Mitch McConnell to get Biden elected president as quickly as possible. Yes, as if, of course, it was good for Mitch McConnell to have someone else, to have Joe Biden as president. How? Mitch McConnell got everything he wanted during a Trump presidency. They signed one of the biggest tax cuts for the rich that we've had since the Bush tax cuts. Mitch McConnell would have loved to have Donald Trump in the White House because Donald Trump's stupid enough to sign almost anything the establishment wants. Okay, I know. It doesn't make any sense, right? But anyway, he says, well, the vice president position is not an automatic conveyor if obvious signs of voter frauds or irregularities exist. That's why the Democrats and rhinos are working feverishly together to change the very law that Mike Pence and his unwitting advisors used on January 6th to say there's no choice. The reason they want it changed is because they now say they don't want the vice president to have the right to ensure an honest vote. In other words, I was right, and everyone knows it. I was right, he screamed as he clutched his pens in his greasy Cheeto fingers. I know Cheetos aren't greasy, but he probably had like a hamburger earlier. I don't know. Cheeseburger, maybe. Anyway, if there is fraud or large-scale irregularities, it would have been appropriate to send those votes back to the legislatures to figure it out. Oh, you mean the legislatures that were filled with fake electors? Yeah, that's great. The Dems and rhinos want to take that right away. A great opportunity lost, but not forever. In the meantime, our country is going to hell. Now, look, I've explained before, and I don't think I need to do it again, that Donald Trump is reading the Electoral Count Act wrong. I know reading comprehension is incredibly difficult, especially when you're a one-pager kind of guy. You see what I mean? But look, let me just clarify in the fact that the big change to the Electoral Count Act is the fact that there is no big change. Literal no change. What they're doing is that they're clarifying the language so that moronic proto-fascists like Donald Trump can't claim that the president can pick, or I'm sorry, the vice president can pick the president. That's not a thing. It never has been. It just never has been. But, you know, if you're dumb or you want to manipulate dumb people, then you could jump on things that people either haven't read or don't quite understand for your own political ambitions. And I understand political speak can get a little complicated, especially for people with smoother brains. But here's the thing, right? Break it down simply. Do you think that if Joe Biden could have picked the president in 2016, when he was outgoing, right, that he would have chosen Donald Trump or not have chosen Hillary Clinton? Now, again, you remember how hysterical the media was about Donald Trump winning the election over Hillary Clinton. I remember. We all remember. So now, if Biden had the power to choose Hillary Clinton, why didn't he just choose Hillary Clinton and completely negate the election? Why even have elections at this point if they were able to do that? Well, and the answer is, of course, that he can't do that, and we have elections. Again, you have the power, you're going to use it. And everybody knows it. Everyone knows it, except maybe, and this is a very important maybe Donald Trump, who might be dumb enough to believe it. And if he's not dumb enough to believe it, well, then that leaves the other possibility, which is a little bit more scary, that he is knowingly using it to manipulate his followers into trying to do an actual takeover. The media didn't see Trump coming. Yes, but once he got elected, remember, there is a portion of time in which, after the election, there is time, you got to do the vote counts, you got to do the certification, etc., and then the new president takes power. Well, I mean, within that meantime, the media was flipping out over Donald Trump. Oh, I can't believe he won. Oh my God, how did he beat Hillary Clinton? Why didn't they just do it at that time? Like, no, it's not true. It's not true. Joe Biden, pick Hillary Clinton. Pick Hillary Clinton. But he doesn't have the power to do so. We know that. All right, anyway. Let's talk about legitimate political discourse. Last week, the Republican Party admitted that they really actually don't care about law and order, at least when it comes to members of their own party. In a censure vote against GOP representatives Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney for taking part of the House Select Committee's investigation of January 6th attack, the RNC, Republican National Committee, passed a resolution saying the two lawmakers were participating in the persecution of ordinary citizens engaged in what they called legitimate political discourse. Ah, yes, legitimate political discourse. I see. Now, Ronna McDaniel Romney, who, by the way, dropped the Romney part when she went full in for Trump, said Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger crossed a line. They chose to join Nancy Pelosi in a Democrat-led persecution of ordinary citizens who engaged in legitimate political discourse that had nothing to do with the violence at the Capitol. Now, that last line, that had nothing to do with violence at the Capitol. Those final words were not in the resolution that was adopted on Friday. So that resolution actually almost went stronger and would have basically kicked them out of the conference, out of the party, essentially. They didn't go in that direction. And then, of course, later on, they had to come back and add that last part that had nothing to do with the violence at the Capitol. Now, that's a great sign when you have to go and do that. It kind of shows a teeny tiny little bit of self-awareness on their part. You know what I'm saying? Now, unfortunately, of course, that distinction does nothing because, as we know, the people who are being charged did do crimes, literally did crimes. Trespassing is a criminal offense. Disrupting official proceeding is a criminal offense. Parading and picketing within a Capitol building, also a criminal offense. Now, a lot of that stuff, of course, is misdemeanors. And so that explains why the sentences have been very light for those who participated in the violence. And as I've explained in previous videos, they also don't really have a definition, in this case, for terrorism or terrorism charges for these specific offenses, even if it is related, or since it was related, to trying to overturn an election through, I guess, intimidation and violence and things like that. But anyway, now the people, look, the Republican Party apparently, again, doesn't give a damn as long as, well, it's their voters. Because if you're, okay, let's look at it this way, right? So we know what the Republican voters, the MAGA chuds, did on January 6th, right? That's totally fine for the Republicans. But when it comes to police, or I should say protests against police shooting unarmed black people, well, that's a different story. We have to crush them. We have to come after them. And it's the hypocrisy there that is incredibly relevant and very, very evident. And so this is what they consider to be legitimate political discourse. Now, again, even if you weren't in the violence and you were still doing those other things, those are still crimes. And the Republican Party is basically saying, I can't believe you would go after people with criminal charges for doing crime. But they did the crime. They did the crime. All right, so now, that said, this, believing in lies and railing against a lawful election and trying to intimidate people outside the State House during, an official proceeding, that's legitimate political discourse. But BLM rallies, those are not. Oh, no, of course not. And look, they have a track record on this, and I think you're all familiar with that. In fact, since 2016, 15 states, and this is how much they really love legitimate political discourse, 15 states have enacted legislation to limit protest. This is according to the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law. A total of 17 states have pending legislation aimed at regulating demonstration. According to NBC, lawmakers in Florida, Indiana, Mississippi, Nebraska, Arizona, Maryland, Minnesota, New Hampshire, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Rhode Island, Virginia, and Washington had filed bills that critics claim are using the violence at the Capitol to actually target social justice protests. Many of the bills are similar or identical to ones introduced in those states the year prior. So, same bill, going after protests, BLM protesters specifically, but now they're saying, oh, no, it's because of the Capitol riots. But then again, but we also don't believe what the Capitol rioters did was was a criminal. That's what the National Republican Party is now saying. And that's legitimate political discourse. But again, if you're black, illegitimate riots, we got to crush them. Total hypocrisy. Oh, but there's more. See, Ravi Perry, the chair of the political science department at Howard, noticed that all the bills were introduced by Republicans, except for one in Rhode Island. 2/3 of the states are controlled by Republican governors and or Republican state legislatures, he said, and they are interested in cracking down on what they perceive to be the unruliness of Black Lives Matter protests, or just, let's just be honest, right? They think black people are more violent and therefore want to crack down on them. You know how it is. The majority of bills, they say, use almost identical language and suggest similar penalties, most requiring third-degree felonies for property damage, injuring a person or obstructing roadways, second-degree felonies for destroying or toppling over monuments, and first-degree misdemeanors of harassment for confrontations in public spaces, such as confronting elected officials in restaurants. Do that, you're in trouble. Break into Nancy Pelosi's office and steal her laptop. Legitimate political discourse. Okay, all right. Fun. Now, the lawmakers also proposed hefty fines and mandatory jail sentences ranging from 30 days to 4 years, depending on the offense. Florida, Indiana, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Virginia, and Washington bills redefine a riot or unlawful assembly as 3 or more partaking in tumultuous activity, which again is, if you're a left-winger or if you're black, 3 or more of you, well, I mean, you know, that's, you're talking, that means you're engaging in tumultuous activity. Sure. Arizona, Indiana, and Mississippi bills strip state benefits, including scholarships, healthcare, and unemployment or food assistance, from anyone convicted of protest-related crimes and bars them from future state or local government employment. Hey, you know what they assume? MAGA rioters don't need state benefits. You know the people, oh, you know the type of the people who need those. Those people, you know what I'm saying? So if we just cut them off. Yeah, but no MAGA rioter is you know, no Trump supporter, real Republican, needs state benefits. No, of course we know that's a load of horse shit. But we know who they aim it at. Obvious hypocrisy is obvious. They don't want black people. They don't want lefties protesting. But again, if you're the right wing, come on in. Go ahead. Storm the Capitol. And by the way, from my opinion, violence from either side is unacceptable and is not legitimate political discourse. But there's those assumptions. Anytime black people or lefties gather, it's a riot. But right-wingers, you're the legitimate people because you actually have a legitimate point of view. No, they don't. This is just another example of the GOP's right-wing privilege and white grievance politics at work. All right. Let's go. There's nothing like a good conservative cat fight. I enjoy it. You enjoy it. We all enjoy it. And so now this latest cat fight is actually showing deep divisions within the Republican Party between the establishment and the Trump wing. So now recently, the Republican National Committee declared the events of January 6th to be legitimate political discourse. So now that's their rebuke of the January 6th committee and the censure, of course, Representatives Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney. So now later on, of course, they clarified sort of that, oh, no, we only mean the nonviolent ones. They're the ones that were engaging in legitimate political discourse, even though they're still breaking the law. All right. Well, now this has conservatives warring at each other openly over the future of the party. Will it be the Trump party or will it be the establishment party? So now, hours before the vote, you had several Republicans, including Senator Mitt Romney, who said this, quote, "Shame falls on a party that would censure persons of conscience who seek truth in the face of vitriol. Honor attaches to Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger for seeking truth, even when doing so comes at great personal cost." Now, again, that's Mitt Romney. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana tweeted this, "The RNC essentially lynched Cheney and Adam Kinzinger because they are trying to find out what happened on January 6th. Huh? Maryland Governor Larry Hogan wrote this on Twitter, "The GOP I believe in is the party of freedom and truth. It's a sad day for my party and the country when you're punished just for expressing your beliefs, standing on principle, and refusing to tell blatant lies." Then, of course, you have the National Review. National Review, again, a conservative outlet, conservative publication. Here's a column they wrote, or some excerpts of. "The action of the mob on January 6th was an indefensible disgrace. It is deserving of both political accountability and criminal prosecution. Aspects of it are also fit subjects for a properly conducted congressional inquiry. It is wrong to minimize or excuse what happened that day. The RNC's massive misstep in labeling the Capitol action legitimate political discourse is political malpractice of the highest order coming from people whose entire job is politics." I mean, look, all of that, yes, true. So far, so good. And it is actually a pretty strong rebuke, to be fair. Now, they added, once again, this is true, that it's going to cause real damage to the party because it will be used against them. And again, Democrats, you'd be stupid if you didn't use that against them, honestly, because it is politics. Politics is dirty. So now, here's what they said on that. "It will be used against hundreds of elected Republicans who are not consulted in the drafting of the wording and do not endorse its sentiment. The RNC bought the entire party a bounty of bad headlines and easy attack ads. It did so for no good purpose, and its action will only encourage those who see riots as legitimate political discourse, a mistake, and worse, a shame." Now, I don't think they're wrong about a lot of this. Now, let me push back a little bit and just go back to how riots are the language of the unheard. But in this case, MAGA chuds are not unheard. In fact, we couldn't get them to shut the fuck up about the election or about anything for something that's so-called, that is called the silent minority, or no, I'm sorry, not silent minority, silent majority. Thank you. For people who are called the silent majority, they never shut up. They're the loudest motherfuckers in the room. And so it kind of boggles my mind, right? Not the language of the unheard. No, these are the people that are very, 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 very heard. And all of these, and all of the things that they say are pretty much nonsense. But as I said, what do you expect? Okay. So now this is, for my opinion, this is not the establishment party anymore, the Republican Party. It's the party of Trump now. And honestly, I ask, what did you expect from this? And I'll go to illustrate the fact that they spent decades priming their voters. Through, of course, right-wing media, talk radio, Fox News, etc. And what they've done is that they have filled them with distrust in what they consider to be liberal institutions, basically academia, science, facts, and government, of course. And so they did that because it made it easier to convince their base, the middle-class suburbanites, and racist, of course, in not just racist, but yes, definitely racist. But then you also have people that were not living in big cities, in rural areas, whatever. And it made them easier to convince them to believe in Reaganomics. The wealth is going to trickle down, folks. I mean, if you just give everything to the rich, what comes off their plate, what spills over the edge, the crumbs, they can be yours one day. You know, if you fight everybody else, obviously, for those crumbs. And of course, to let them kill unions, as Reagan did. And of course, as a result of all these policies that were massively favored towards the people who were in power, the actual elites, the powerful politicians, etc., the middle class began to hemorrhage. All that new wealth went to the top. And so as a result, the Republican Party took their messaging and they said, well, it's not the rich elites that are doing this. No. It's welfare. It's black people. It's immigrants. It's the working poor. They're taking all your money. That guy, he's got your cookie. Go beat him up for it. Metaphorically, of course. Although, of course, sometimes they do mean it literally, in a literal sense. That's what they did. And for decades, got them to believe and create this entire fictional reality around themselves. And this is the result. This is what happens. The Republican Party is simply dealing with the monster of its own creation. And that's why I believe the Republican Party needs to die. It just needs, as an institution, it's got to go. It's just got to go. I don't agree with Nancy Pelosi. I don't agree with Joe Biden. I don't think we need a strong Republican Party. We need a left-wing party because we don't have one. Or at the very least, a center-left party because we don't even have one of those. Something. And then, of course, if we actually have a left-wing party, then the Democrats can take their place as the Republican Party because their policies are essentially, on the economic side, old-school republicanism, but just without the racism, or at least without the open racism. But as I said before, Trump is the logical end result of the foxification of the Republican Party. He is not the disease itself. He is not the cancer. No, he is a symptom. The real cancer is the greed. The real cancer is the donors. And it's the ideology itself. Yeah, okay. Biggest welfare queens are big corporations. Correct. You are very correct. Trump is a boil. Yeah, that tracks. True. Very, very true. All right. The biggest fear regarding racists is basically them losing power to people of color by 2045, says Jules T in the chat. I can't disagree with that. I really can't. It's a good, excellent point. Excellent point. All right. Let's move on. We got a Fox fail. I'm sorry, a CNN fail before the Fox fail. But was it really a mistake? That's the question. Oop. Well, at least I know I got that right. CNN recently made a bit of an oopsie during an interview on State of the Union. So let me just show that to you. All right. Do you notice anything? You notice anything that's off about this? Maybe near his name? Yeah. That's him being labeled as a Republican. So now look, this happened during a weirdo joint interview with a Republican, Lisa Murkowski, whom Joe Manchin gave a full-throated endorsement of for her re-election bid. Take a look.
I can't help but notice that Senator Murkowski...
I'm endorsing my dear friend Lisa Murkowski. Alaska could only be so lucky to have her continue to serve them.
Thank you.
She knows I feel that way too, very strongly. Only thing I've said is hypocritical to basically work with a person day in and day out, and then when they're in cycle, you're supposed to be against them because they have an R or a D by their name. If these are good people I've worked with, we have accomplished a lot, why in the world wouldn't I want to work with them and continue to work with them? Doesn't matter whether I'm a Democrat and they're Republican or vice versa. They've been my dear friends, and we get a lot accomplished, and I think the country has fared better with us working together than not.
Senator
There used to be a time when we did that.
I know.
Stevens and Inouye, legendary.
I'm all for you.
They would go and campaign in one another's states.
Oh, Stevens from Alaska and Inouye from Hawaii. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would campaign for each other.
Yeah.
Feel the love. There's so much love there. I mean, this is oh, Lisa Murkowski. Oh, I work with you. You're so good. I mean, I get along with you so well because we both serve the same people. No. Now, look, again, you saw the mislabeling here. I don't think that's an error. It's more like, I don't know, rain on your wedding day, a free ride when you've already paid, or some good advice that you just didn't take. I think you get it. It's ironic. So, look, my problem here, to get serious, isn't so much that he's saying we should be able to reach across the aisle and work together to get things done. Well, I mean, yes, that's what we're supposed to do. I guess they're supposed to do. But the problem is that they're not doing that. They're not doing that. And when they do, it's not to benefit us. Because, they don't care about us. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All right. Now, as it stands, there is no way Biden's agenda is going to pass the Republican Party. If that agenda involves helping working people in any way, shape, or form, the Republicans are going to be against it. Simply put. Why? Because, well, of course, playing politics as they do, they want to avoid giving Joe Biden any kind of policy win that helps regular working people. Because, it turns out they want to win midterms. And they want to win the presidency in 2024. So I don't think Joe Manchin seems to understand how politics works. But I think he actually does. But anyway, look, let me give you some examples of how the bipartisanship that we see in this country is basically there only for the benefit of the donors. Bipartisan infrastructure is a great example. That was a massive handout to corporate America. Huge. The American Rescue Plan, also massive handout to the wealthy, even though there were people that got some very much needed relief in the form of a one-time stimulus check, as well as unemployment benefits. The only reason people got those is because corporations were concerned that their stocks would plummet. Once they got that bill passed, the stocks began to stabilize, and guess what? The businesses, and we've seen this, billions of dollars, they took that money and they pumped it back into their own stocks. They bought their own stock back. And then, once they were able to do that and make billions off of it, they then pushed to cancel unemployment benefits as much as and as soon as possible. That's what happened. That right now is the true nature of the current bipartisanship. When you think about it, though, it is about D's and R's, but it's not about Democrats and Republicans. It's donations and return on investment. That's what our politics comes down to these days. Wealthy business interests made a massive investment in Joe Manchin and to keep the status quo. Just after his December announcement on Fox News that he said he wouldn't support Build Back Better, Joe Manchin just happened to receive $5,000 from a GOP billionaire, mega donor, and his wife to his political action committee. Weird how that works out. Very, very strange, isn't it? No, it's not strange. It's the greed. It's the corruption. But look, instead of getting things done, as Manchin claims, I'm in favor of getting things done. I'm getting things done. That's why I'm blocking things. Doesn't seem to make sense, right? But It does. Look, they're sitting in the way. He and Kirsten Sinema, they're in the way of Build Back Better, despite, of course, giving massive concessions, the Democrats did, to Manchin and Sinema, stripping out and watering down its most popular provisions in order to bring the cost down to some arbitrary number that Joe Manchin thought was better. And then, when they get to that number, Joe Manchin moves the goalposts once again lower and lower. Look, originally Joe Manchin was open to $4 trillion in new spending. And then what happened? His donors came calling. And now, it's $1.7 trillion. By the way, all this is over 10 years. Over 10 years. It's still too much. And now the bill itself is dead, which is in line exactly with what the Republicans and the donors to both parties wanted. There is nothing more bipartisan in Washington today than defending the donors. And so believe me when I tell you, bipartisanship very much alive in Washington, D.C. right now. It just doesn't ever benefit you. It benefits the donors every single time. So it is no surprise to me that Manchin is endorsing Lisa Murkowski, and that, by the way, later on, she also endorsed him back. Because they both know exactly who they serve, and guess what? It ain't the people. Never will be. I don't trust Manchin, says Liz Gallo on Facebook. Who would? But to be fair, there's very, very few politicians that I actually do trust. All right. Now let's go to Fox Fail. This is one of the best stories. One of my favorites for the day. On Saturday's edition of Unfiltered with Dan Bongino, turns out a little filtering would have went a long way. Now, this was during the segment, Tale of Two Americas, where Bongino tried to portray that large cities run by Democrats as unsafe and unhealthy. They decided to use a map of the U.S. that they claimed highlighted the top 10 most unhealthy U.S. cities. Here is that segment.
Let's look at some major policy areas, right? The economy, healthcare, education, public safety. Where are economies struggling right now, right? Inner cities run exclusively and monopolistically by garbage Democrat politicians who don't give a damn about people. They're the ones that ran these economies in these inner cities into the ground. In some of these cities, they haven't had a Republican elected in 4 or 5 decades. Two Americas, yeah, you created it. An America where you can get a job and an America where you can't. And then let's not forget about the health care either. You go to you look at some of the health outcomes in some of these inner cities that these Democrats have run monopolistically for decades, and you stand a pretty darn good chance of dying in one of these inner cities, far more likely than if you lived in areas where they gave a damn about people and their health care outcomes.
Aw, this guy, look, it's adorable. He's playing the populist. That is so freaking cute. Of course we know it's all bullshit because he doesn't actually care about regular people, but he's just saying that. No, look, I love this because we'll get to the fake graphic in a minute, okay? But let's look at the major policy, right? Economy, healthcare, education, public safety. Yeah. Oh, okay, yes. Yes, absolutely. Let's look at that. What is it? California is like the 5th largest economy. They're running a budget surplus. Wait a minute. And you have red states that are taking more in government welfare than blue states. I mean, it appears that they're not doing so. The blue states are subsidizing the red states. Are you sure you want to go with that? Are you sure you want to go with that? Okay. I mean, again, if you cared about health outcomes of regular people, then is Dan Bongino in favor of Medicare for all? Dan Bongino, like, come over, support Medicare for all. Like, we'd love to have you promote that on your show. Bring on Bernie Sanders. You guys can have a great conversation, I bet. But is that going to happen? Of course not. No, of course not. But here's the thing, right? Getting to the graphic, finally. Notice how it showed the top 10 unhealthiest and dangerous cities in the United States. Well, in reality, according to their own source, the source that was cited there, Wallet Hub, it actually had 9 of the healthiest cities. Oops. Healthcare, food, fitness, green space. No, it's very interesting. San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, San Diego, Honolulu, Washington, Austin, Irvine. Irvine's funny because they actually meant Irving, Texas. Portland and Denver. The 2 Portlands. Oops. Oh, that's so somebody needs to be fired for that debacle. That mistake. But look, Wallet Hub, the source for the Unfiltered cited in its graphic, is again the healthiest places to live in the United States. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't know. But like, healthiest generally means, or I should say, is generally the opposite of most unhealthy. Healthy, there's healthy, and then there's unhealthy. They're kind of not in this. They're opposite ends of the spectrum. Seems like a bit of an oversight here. Weird how that would happen. But that's not the only one. As I mentioned, Irvine, California was actually supposed to mean Irving, Texas. But whatever. How embarrassing. Or is it embarrassing? You think anybody watching Dan Bongino is going to, I don't know, fact check Dan Bongino? No. They're going to agree with everything he says. Oh yeah. All these cities, these big cities, they're open sewers filled with trash, waste, and disease. I'll follow the liberal Democrats and encourage homelessness and illegal immigration and allow Antifa to burn it down every couple of months. None of which is true. None of that's true at all. Yes, do cities have problems? Sure, of course. Homelessness is a major issue, especially with, when you combine it with the lack of mental health care, soaring addiction, diseases of despair, housing that's unaffordable. If you want to blame Democrats for not tackling those issues effectively, that's totally fair. We do all this, on the show all the time. California, the great example is California could have guaranteed mental health care or just health care in general to all of their citizens. Well, they chose not to. There was a Medicare for all bill that was coming up that was pulled. Now, why did they do that? Well, it's because of the healthcare industry donations. You have corruption in the government, I know. But that's a far more interesting story than saying, look at these gross homeless people, also Democrats bad. You know why? Because it actually talks about the real issues. But it's not, by the way, it is not a simple thing to do, okay? Because you might actually have to get in some nuance and talk about how it's the donors, how you have unaffordable housing because you have landlord groups that are lobbying, real estate developers that are lobbying, that donate to politicians and buy them. Now, if Dan Bongino were actually serious about solving the problems in the cities, he'd go after the corruption, regardless of the party. The party doesn't matter as long as both sides are being bought by the same people. But in reality, of course, Dan Bongino loves the corruption. He's totally fine with it. As long as it means that, hey, I don't care if a corrupt Republican gets into office, as long as it's not a corrupt Democrat. Well, then I'm you know what? I can't really have a conversation on that because he doesn't challenge the corruption. Now, in the statement, a Fox News spokesperson told Mediaite on Saturday night's episode of Unfiltered with Dan Bongino, A graphic was aired with inaccurate information on the unhealthiest cities in the country. We regret the error, which will be corrected on next week's program. You know how they corrected this? They ran B-roll of homeless people. Instead of showing the graphic, they just ran B-roll of homeless people to scare their audience. Same lies, same bullshit, graphic of homeless people, because you know what, at the end of the day, this isn't about facts, because facts don't matter when you are, like Dan Bongino is, doing propaganda. Danny Bongos is a good example of failing upwards. He was a moron back on NRI TV. You know, I've seemed to notice that people fail upwards all the time. Started to get irritating knowing that. All right, anyway. One more story here. Recently, the Biden administration was shamed into dropping an appeal in which it tried to block a federal a judge from canceling student loan debt. So now the Daily Poster did a story last week showing that the Biden administration had actually moved to appeal a Delaware court ruling that would have eliminated nearly $100,000 in student loan debt for a disabled borrower. Now, the borrower is a 35-year-old epileptic man named Ryan Wolfson. So now Wolfson, look, there was no way he was going to be able to pay back this debt. Again, he was disabled, and yet at the same time, he had been working full-time driving for Uber, Lyft, and Grubhub, so he was doing the gig economy, right? So now it was while working that he had suffered a seizure and ended up totaling his vehicle, basically ending his ability to even try to pay some of those student loans, much less survive. And again, if you're working in the gig economy, very likely you're not able to survive anyway, or you're having a very hard time. So now, as a result of this, here's what the judge had written. The evidence shows that despite considerable effort, Wolfson had been chronically or underemployed since graduating from college, that his sporadic full-time employment has consisted of low-paying gig work or jobs with little prospect of advancement, and that he has avoided living in abject poverty only through significant financial support from his father. The record further shows that Wolfson's career prospects are unlikely to materially improve over time, and thus his inability to pay his student loan debt will persist. And so, as a result, the court discharged Wolfson's debt. Now, the judge also, her decision, departed from other bankruptcy courts, which usually have been hesitant. Most of the time, when it comes to bankruptcy, they side not with the person, but with the companies, with the creditors. But the Biden administration decided to find this very, very rare judgment in favor of a debtor and say, not on our watch. Not going to happen. The Biden administration attempted to appeal that decision in order to force this guy back into paying these loans that he'd never be able to afford, ever. And again, when you look at his situation, there was no way. Again, he's a disabled person. He is not able to work in these jobs in order to pay back that loan. So now, now, here's the thing. You had Assistant U.S. Attorney Jacob Laskin. Now, he's the guy who filed the appeal in Wolfson's case. So now what's interesting about this guy is that he's in the Justice Department and is a Trump holdover. Now, why was he still there? Well, ask Merrick Garland. Because Merrick Garland could have fired him, could have asked him to, not fired him, but asked him to resign from the Justice Department. Is this not really a big difference here? Resign or be fired, right? But they decided not to. Just keep the Trump holdovers. Totally fine. And you want to go and make sure that this guy pays his loans, even though he's never going to be able to? And will be buried in debt and interest for the rest of his life? Okay, sure. Now, that said, on Friday, the Biden administration was shamed into doing the right thing and said that it was withdrawing its attempt to block the ruling. This is according to a Department of Education spokesperson. This January 28th notice of appeal will soon be withdrawn. The Department of Education has indicated publicly that it's reviewing current bankruptcy policy in which a process which remains ongoing. While the student loan payment pause remains in effect, any borrower in an adversary bankruptcy proceeding can request and receive a stay on their proceedings. Following a statement to the Daily Poster, Undersecretary of Education James Cavall tweeted Friday morning, "We will withdraw the appeal in the Wolfson bankruptcy case and review how we handle future claims." Now, again, this is good. All right. Imagine the damage to other student borrowers if this guy who had zero prospects, no hope, no ability to pay back these loans, and to a degree, education that he was not even able to use through no fault of his own. I mean, that would have been just incredible. The precedent that it would set in other court moments. Now, barring that, of course, you should expand the question. Why should education cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans and interest? Just so that you can maybe try to get a decent job in the first place. There's no guarantee. You're not guaranteed a good job for having a good education. But it costs so much now that you need to have the income from that job to pay it back. And if you cannot find that, then you're SOL. That is a broken system. And do you know who broke it more? Joe Biden. Joe Biden pushed a bill in the Senate during his Senate career, making it incredibly difficult to discharge student loan debt through bankruptcy, through his bankruptcy bill. And and by the way, it's made it very hard to reduce student loan debt at all. In fact, one of his campaign promises to say, "Oh, let's get rid of $10,000 worth of student loan debt," even though I have the unilateral ability to do so, I refuse to do. I refuse to do 50,000, and I refuse to do 10,000. In fact, I refuse to do any. But we'll still extend the pause because my ratings of favorability ratings have taken a complete dump. Well, okay, let's do the pause, but only temporary, because one way or another, they're going to get their money. The student loan debt collections companies, they're going to get their money. And by the way, those are the people that are contracted to collect it. And yes, they are able to skim off the top, and they get government contracts in order to do so. That's who's making money. The student loan servicing companies, Sallie Mae. Or, well, it was Sallie Mae. Now I think it's something else. All these different companies that have popped up that have changed their names so many times because, of course, all these really negative PR debacles that they've had. And so, look, again, the situation here is quite terrible. And yet Joe Biden has consistently taken the side of creditors. Why? Because he's always been on the side of creditors. He was a senator from MBNA. Always with the creditors against the debtors. That's why I never believed him when he said that he'd forgive $10,000 in student loan debt, which again, that money, that debt is an albatross across the necks of, around the necks of an entire generation. $1.7 trillion. 1.7 in outstanding student loan debt. During a time when younger Americans are actually doing worse economically than their parents, despite being better educated. We need student loan debt cancellation, totally. Full stop. Full stop. And then we also need to enact tuition-free state-funded higher education in order to prevent a crisis like this from happening again. And by the way, that's for, public universities. If you want to still have private colleges that use private tuition, that's totally fine. That's still an option here in America. But for God's sakes, make publicly funded education, or I should say, public higher education publicly funded. And if you do that, by the way, it's going to be a boon for the economy. It's going to be a boon for regular people. In a 2018 paper from the Levy Economic Institute of Bard College that is using 2016 data, which looked at the effects of student loan debt forgiveness. The authors wrote that a one-time cancellation of the, at the time, $1.4 trillion outstanding student loan debt held would translate to an increase of $86 billion to $108 billion on average to the GDP. Not bad. Not bad. Canceling student debt would also mean that current monthly payments could go forward towards savings or other spending. Let's be honest, likely towards other spending, especially since now we have inflation that have wiped out any wage increases over the past couple of years. But yeah, those who make payments usually pay about $200 to $300 per month. Well, that could go to groceries, that could go to bills, that could go to car payment, that could go to something. But instead it goes to these student loan servicers. Now, it would also help black students who actually have a higher debt burden than the white peers. About 87% of black students attending four-year colleges take out more student loans compared to about 60% of white students. They also owe $74,000 more on average than their white peers after graduating. And post-college, it's actually more difficult for them to be able to financially catch up. And so, look, as the Economic Policy Institute wrote in one of its more recent wage reports, average wages grew faster among white and Hispanic workers than among black workers for all education groups from 2000 to 2019. Look, this is a good first step. And honestly, they had to be shamed into doing it. But at least they can be, I guess. Shamed into doing something. But there's much, much more that could be done. Dan Zeibel, Vice President of the Chief Counsel for the National Student Legal Defense Network, a nonprofit that represents students in cases related to education and student debt, told the Daily Poster this: obviously, this is welcome news for one borrower, and we're glad to see the department taking this step, but this situation highlights how the department must immediately review its practices and positions with respect to bankruptcy and student loan cases. And of course, I would add that maybe we should get on, I don't know, eliminating some student loan debt. Or, you know, all of it. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Everybody, hopefully you enjoyed the show. We're going to raid into someone else here on Twitch. I'm not sure yet who is on. Here we go. The truckers, it appears. The surf's talking about the truckers. I think we'll raid into that. If you're interested in seeing that, because that's a ridiculous story, as usual. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time. Love you all. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. See you all later.
Big, massive dumps.
I have not loved this conversation.
Give me a break. Please clap.
Tighten up my knee. I like my knee tight.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.